I've had my fair share of videos complaining about PvZ 3 Evolved. PvZ 3 Evolved was my least favorite PvZ game out of all the three. I really did not like it, but I gotta say, although it is still my least favorite, it's still been pretty good lately. Although Evolved has had a lot of ups and downs, and at this point, there's been so many reworks. Let's start to see how they went from the past to now finally evolving. The first PvZ 3 version ever began on July 16, 2019 for pre-alpha testing. Hell, it technically entered its pre-visualization stage as early as 2016 to 2017. There's nothing that consistent with the concept art, and it doesn't really match up to the 2019 to 2020 version or anything, but it's still pretty interesting to see. Supposedly, it was even announced in a Chinese licensing fair that it was meant to be released in 2017. Obviously, it never released at that time. But yeah, back to the pre-alpha, it straight up sucked. Which you all know by now, it was ugly, pure mobile game slop. I genuinely don't know what they were thinking with this. I would go on about it, but I think it's clear why nobody liked it in the first place. PopCap actually listened to us though and did a complete rework on the third game right after. Well, it wasn't any better. They re-released the soft launch around September 2021, which was also hated on, though I believe there was at least some improvement. The art style is definitely 10 times more charming, and it wasn't in portrait mode. But there were still a ton of problems, and it was still just a generic mobile game. Then the game straight up went dry. People even thought that EA straight up silently cancelled it. Then it came back in 2024? I mean, okay, I guess. Then it was taken down again months later for a complete overhaul, meaning everything would most likely be changed, and it did. Because on October 7, 2025, PvZ 3 Evolved finally came out. They grabbed the PvZ Fusion fan game and did their own twist on it. And to this day, it's still a beta. It's not out internationally. If you're in the United States, you cannot buy it directly. You have to download it from a PvZ Discord server as an APK. I honestly understand why. I mean, the PvZ community, myself included, can be pretty judgmental, and there's a lot of high standards, so I understand why they want to make sure things are pitch perfect before they finally release the official game. That's exactly what they're doing. The community manager, Pedro, has vocalized and acknowledged that he is aware that there are issues in the game, and that they're working on improving it. Why do you think the avatars were removed? A lot of people hated it, and that's why they're completely gone now. Point is, they're actually listening. These are human beings, not just millionaire greeds, kind of, but rather a team working together to make sure we get a perfect PvZ 3 Evolved experience. And I do believe that there is some sort of showcase that they are listening to us. So let's start with what I've noticed in terms of improvement compared to the older PvZ 3 Evolved and other versions that I really did not like. Starting with something I mentioned in my last video, but I do want to emphasize now because it's my favorite part of the game. Unlocking plants isn't such a hindrance as it was before. In the older version, it was unrealistically impossible to unlock plants in a reasonable time. Even if you grinded your heart out, you would have barely been able to unlock a tier 3 plant, let alone a tier 2 one somehow. Which was odd as the game's main gimmick is unlocking fusions and seeing what they do, and you couldn't even do that. Now they do have the same system as unlocking them through different seeds depending on what the plant does, and I don't really like that as I've established before. I like plants being unlocked through progression of levels rather than materials, but technically as you progress you do earn seeds, and with these seeds you can use them on any plant, giving you the ability to choose what plant you want. Finally, unlike before, I have almost every plant in the game, and I have to say, I do love these plants. I do think the highlight of this game, to be honest, is the plants with how creative they could be. Let's start with design wise. In my Decline of PvZ 2's art style video, I talk about how plant designs should tell you what to do just on how they look visually. It's what the designs were intended to be when PvZ first came out, or someone who didn't know English could look at a design and know exactly what it does. Honestly, I do think that some of the PvZ 3 designs do really establish themselves quite well. You look at them and not only are they as charming and energetic as the second game's designs, they also resemble their mechanics as well. For example, it is very clear that speargrass does work like a spikeweed, but you can also see its piercing-like arms on its body that emphasize that it pierces through zombies. They obviously look like spears, or lychee. It's clear that it deals damage based on the spikes around its body, or nippy cabbage with its ice cubes around its fists that make it clear that it'll freeze. But obviously there's exceptions. There are designs that are awesome and pretty sick, but they're a bit iffy in terms of being able to tell what they do based on how they look, like snow conifer. It's literally just a tree. It's not really clear that it's a mid-range striker that can block overhead attacks too. I know you can combine block with an ice weed, but where does the shooting come from? There's no shooter that you're combining. Is it ugly? No, it looks freaking sick. But This is just one plant out of many, there's always an exception. The plants are the primary eye catch of the game, and thankfully, they're fun. Dare I say the plants in PvZ3 Evolved are way better design-wise than plants in PvZ Fusion. As PvZ Fusion plants are either just basic plants mixed together without any sort of uniqueness, or a cluttered mess, like Odyssey plants. So it's nice to see that PvZ3 Evolved does have a simplistic but pleasant art style. We've come a long way from the first version. And I do believe that the newer levels, believe it or not, don't feel so fast-paced. A complaint I had was that levels felt so rushed. I still have a lot of complaints about the level design, but at least they don't feel so quick. I'm glad that's the case, as I want to have the most time possible in order to be able to try out tier 3 plans, as they do take longer to create, and it makes levels feel more memorable, I guess? Well, that's usually how long levels are supposed to be, but memorable is not a good way to describe PvZ3 levels, to be honest. But at least they don't end in the blink of an eye. I do believe PvZ1 levels are so significantly longer and obviously better, but searching out these levels to progress further than 1 to 2 minutes is great. It feels less sloppy and mobile game-like and more like an actual tower defense stage. I do like some of the mechanics in certain levels as well, like in the sewer levels. There's a lot of problems with these levels, but I like the gimmick of shade that keeps mushrooms safe and prevents them from dying quickly compared to if they were placed on the light. It's different from mechanics that I've seen in other games, and isn't just a blatant copy of other mechanics. I do not like some volcano or camp levels purely because most of the gimmicks, like the magma rocks or the fact that there's just random ocean tiles that you generally can't do anything but place Tango Kill fusions on it. What happened to Lily Pad? So this is something more unique. I do like the meteors and volcano levels, as it does incorporate Umbrella Leaf and make it and its fusions tremendously useful, but so far, I like the sewer levels, they're definitely my favorite. You're probably wondering what those other problems are.
No, we're not wondering. Creeper plays PP.
Well, the randomizing of the shade tiles. Sometimes they're very limited, which ruins the potential of where to place your mushrooms. In fact, how random every level is the first thing that puts PvZ3 Evolved slightly lower. Unlike the first two games, the gimmicks and the zombie rate is going to be completely different for everyone. It's just AI spamming zombies, and you just have to place whatever plants you need to counter them. The game even tells you what's the best plants to use when you want to counter zombies, which I have a huge problem with that. I'm not trying to be negative, but I just want to make it apparent that this game is not perfect. Anyway, time for my favorite part of the game. The leveling system is not exhausting. The more I play, the more I start to notice that just like the first game, stronger plants will always be stronger than tier 1 and tier 2 plants, no matter what. A level 1 tier 3 plant can still be significantly tougher than a level 5 or even higher tier 1 plant. The game doesn't necessarily force you into leveling tier 3 plants, as zombies through levels are only around level 2 to 3, so it shouldn't be no problem. It makes me wonder if we will ever have level 10 zombies. Probably not, there's still 125 levels. I feel like that's way too much. Levels are way too randomized and become almost forgettable with how basic they are, and I feel like that's the case because there's just so many levels. Why not add objectives like PvZ2? Add some in-between minigames. It's kinda exhausting to play the same levels over and over again, and just randomly switching worlds every now and then. And I do have to admit that in terms of updates, they've been getting kinda meh. We've only gotten a few plants, which sucks as we could have gotten so many plants by now. PvZ3 does have a huge problem in terms of upcoming content. Though at the end of the day, I do believe that PvZ3 Evolved really is evolving, and we've come a long way from the horrible versions in the past. I'm honestly gonna stay as positive as possible. It's clear that they have some sort of a care for this game, and I'm starting to see that. In summary, from what we've talked about, visually, I like its bright colors and bouncy animations. It is very different from PvZ1's gritty art style, but there's nothing wrong with making things stand out from other games, to be honest, especially when the second game isn't really that gritty art style wise either. The pacing is acceptable, the zombie spam does still suck, and it is inconsistent and random, but it can be worked on. Just lower the amount of levels and make them more iconic and unique from one another. Maybe World 1 is the basics, World 2 is the camps, World 3 is the sewers, World 4 are the volcanic levels, etc. Similar to PvZ2, some of the mechanics in these worlds are creative enough, as well as the zombies. There really is potential with them, honestly. The zombies don't really fit their environments per se, but I'm hoping they can spread them out and organize them into their appropriate worlds. But that's not really a big deal compared to my other critiques. I am so disappointed that they most likely will never remove leveling, but I'm glad they found a way to keep it without it seeming so obnoxious. This is definitely my biggest plus. Keep it up, guys. And lastly, updates should really have more substance to them. More plants, more zombies, something that will prevent the game from feeling so stale as it is the more levels you play. That's about it, guys, and I'll see you in the next one. Also, don't forget to subscribe and like. Please subscribe, please.